Hello, and welcome back to another exciting, thrilling, exhilarating edition of Radio Free USA. I'm your host this week, Tarek, along with my co-host. How's it going, guys?
Hey, going well. Good to be here.
Yeah, not too bad. Happy 9/11.
Happy 9/11. Never forget. Thanks, Rahul and Tim, for joining yet again. This is our 20th podcast. How does it feel to be 20, guys?
It's a thrilling feeling, to be honest.
I can't believe we made it this far, to be honest.
We hit puberty so long ago, and now we're entering that golden decade where we experiment with things in college and give away $20 Amazon gift cards to our loyal listeners who remember all the clowns of the week. So stay tuned for that. Guys, what a phenomenal week off it's been. I mean, we had Labor Day. What did you guys do to celebrate?
I mostly labored. I was working most.
Were you in labor? Are you trying to say you had a kid on Labor Day?
No, I was performing labor. I was doing labor, manual labor myself, not child labor.
Okay, you're a volunteer child laborer. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yes.
I, on the other hand, I think I really honored the unions and the people in the labor movement appropriately by sitting on my ass. So I think that was appropriate.
That's true. The modern day laborer, the white collar ass sitter. What a week! So much to discuss. Let's start with Trump's disastrous DACA decision, Triple D, deferred action for childhood arrivals. Guys, Trump reversed course and really announced this week that he would be turning his back on a couple 100,000 DACA recipients who were immigrants who came to this country as children, and President Obama gave them a chance to declare themselves, provide all the information about themselves to the government, admit essentially that they had an undocumented status, and acquire documents and have the right to legally work. What are your thoughts on Trump's decision, and what are the political implications?
So my main reaction is it's just shocking how universal the support for DACA is, and the fact that Trump would still go through with this. Like, I think it was something like 70% of the country supports DACA. So that's a large percentage of Republicans too. And I think anybody who's reasonable would support this. It's these are people who have known nothing else other than being American, and they could potentially be sent back to a country that they've never known. So it's unpopular, but Trump's base will like it. This is just more red meat to try to solidify his base even further, I guess, and to follow through with some campaign promises.
And I think it further also it symbolizes, I think, one of Trump's primary kind of political ideals or visions is just to be against anything that Obama did. So it's not even as much a logistic. This isn't a matter of logistical, like an issue that would help Americans in any way, or even is popular. It's more just like a fuck Obama type statement. So when Obama left office, he did say, like, look, I'm going to try to stay out of the political limelight unless there are certain things that really hurt the humanity of the country. And he listed this as one of those. Like, if the next administration is going to try to send the Dreamers, like deport Dreamers, despite the fact that there's no reason to, and there's no humane reason to do so, I think that feeds into just Trump's instinct to be like, you know what, if Obama liked it, fuck that.
Yeah, exactly. And it seemed like Trump went against his own instincts here, especially given the repeated statements in which, Trump said, "Oh, Dreamers had nothing to worry about. Oh, we love Dreamers, etc." And then when he made these ridiculous comments like, "Oh, we have to think about our kids, and we want our kids to be Dreamers." You know what I mean? So, what frustrates me the most, though, guys, is the Republican talking point around, well, these people should have, they should get in line, and they should have known better. They should have come here legally, as if it was their fault, right? I mean, Tim, you talked about they knew nothing else. I mean, when you're brought here as a 5-year-old child, it's kind of hard for you to say, no, Mom, we're gonna do this the right way. We're gonna go queue up in Mexico City, and we're gonna, apply for a visa that doesn't exist. It's like you just go with your family, and then you're brought here, you go to school, you grow up. And the irony, guys, is many of these dreamers, they didn't realize that they were undocumented until they tried to apply for college in many circumstances. So it's just a disaster all around.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that's worth pointing out is that I have my doubts that Trump will actually follow through with this based on the reaction that he's been getting. Clearly, the media has been very opposed to it, although I haven't been watching Fox News. But he seems to be already backpedaling. That's why I say that I think there's a chance that he might not go through with it. He tweeted something to the effect of Chuck and Nancy really want to get something done, and I hope we can make all these people very, very happy. So it's kind of like this might be a strategy where he's taking something away just so that he can look like he's giving it back to them, to make it seem like he's so gracious or generous to allow these people to stay.
It's the art of the deal.
But it's a pretty heartless kind of form of like hostage taking.
Oh yeah, I certainly don't support that in any way. This is completely insane. There's 800,000 people who don't know their future. They could be deported. So it's totally crazy.
And they have a legal status right now. They have a legal status. They are able to work. It's ridiculous. Trump's whole thing is let's get the illegals out, but these are the legal people.
Right. And on top of that, it's going to hurt our economy big time because we're going to have 800,000 like very productive workers just instantly gone. It's a not an insignificant portion of our GDP.
Yeah. And it's also like, in terms of its like heartlessness, there are some Trump like kind of policy reversals on Obama era regulations where, well, you can think about it and say like, well, what's actually the real impact going to be? If they reverse some like, some environmental regulations, then, well, there's still like private sector kind of self-regulations in place, or, the Justice Department only pursues certain types of cases. But for this type of, like legal status for these 800,000 people, if they try to apply for a job or get like a credit check or try to apply for a loan, you're immediately like red flagged. It's like a really kind of sharp, immediate impact on these people, as opposed to being like some broad idea of like how policy should change in the next 10 years. This like directly hurts like hundreds of thousands of people.
It's a direct blow, and it's the kind of thing that you would only do if you were desperate, if you weren't able to, that you like pledged your entire campaign on, which is, exactly what Trump's doing here, because he hasn't been able to do anything on the subject of immigration. I really enjoyed, though, the response from corporate America, guys. I don't know if you felt the same way in terms of just the resistance to this decision. The chairman of, or not the chairman, the president of Microsoft came out and said basically they're going to have to go through us if they want to deport these dreamers, right? Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, also came out in support of employees of Apple who are dreamers. And apparently, is it Mark Zuckerberg, I believe, is mentoring a dreamer as well. So it seems like, maybe disproportionately so from Silicon Valley, but there's been a pretty staunch response from corporate America in opposition of Trump's decision to reverse DACA, which I found, was very welcoming from a liberal perspective.
Yeah, totally. And I think that gets back to the fact that this is going to hurt our economy. There are very real repercussions of removing a bunch of productive workers, and the corporations realize that. Microsoft doesn't want these productive people to be removed from their workforce, and neither do any of the other companies. So I think it makes sense.
It does make sense. So moving on, guys. Speaking of Trump's negotiation tactics and the sort of art of the deal, kung fu that he may or may not be playing with DACA, he basically had this moment middle of last week, where he convened a council of senior congressional lawmakers, Republicans and Democrats from both the House and the Senate, including McConnell, Ryan, Schumer, and Pelosi. And then he kind of pulled a fast one and shocked everybody. Do you guys want to give a bit of a synopsis as to what went down in the Oval Office?
Yeah, so it sounds like essentially during this meeting in the White House that Trump sided with Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi on a budget deal that extends the so-called debt ceiling for another 3 months until December, which is against the wishes of Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell. The Republicans, A, don't want to talk about the debt ceiling, but B, if they were going to raise it, they wanted to extend it for a longer period of time, so that it wouldn't become like a political kind of situation in the coming months, and they could avoid talking about it until after the midterm elections are over. So that's what's been kind of funny is Trump apparently did a deal with the Democrats, and it seems from all accounts that this is some petty drama. Like, he's pissed off at Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell about whether it's healthcare or some Russia stuff. What's funny for us, I think, we can laugh about is that he's striking a deal with Democrats out of vanity and anger towards his own party that's like put up with his bullshit forever. So if I just think that if we can trick Trump into voting with us all the time, that could be the best case scenario for this administration.
That's exactly it. I mean, it's because Trump only likes winners, guys. So does this mean that he's tired of Republicans losing and not doing anything in Congress, so he's going to try to work with Democrats?
I think this is him trying to change the narrative, and the narrative of him not being able to get anything done. And to some extent, I think it has worked, at least in the past week. The media tends to be pretty favorable of bipartisan, any sort of bipartisan action. I think, and so I think he's gotten pretty good reviews from about this action, and even Republicans seem to have been okay with it. From what I can tell, I don't know. Is that the same impression you guys got?
The impression I got from kind of how the media perceived this deal, and also what seems to be like inside sources of the White House saying what Trump feels. He's so vain and kind of stupid about matters and has no ideology of his own that, he just wants the good review. So the fact that he's been behaving like an asshole and then the media calls him out on it has really angered him. And then he happens to have hit the right button to be able to get a positive media response, which is to work with Democrats, which maybe if he's a lab rat in this scenario and he keeps pressing the button that gets you electrocuted, but he pressed the one button that gives a little pellet of food, maybe he'll keep doing that. Like, what if he just becomes a Democrat because he realizes that the media will like it if he's bipartisan? That would be great.
Yeah, exactly. Or even he just didn't get electrocuted this time. He didn't even get a pellet of food. I mean, what stood out for me was Paul Ryan, who, keep an eye on him because he's going to come back later on in the show. But basically, Paul Ryan said the day before that it was ridiculous and disgraceful for Democrats to try to play politics with Harvey relief and bundle together funding for Hurricane Harvey with a short-term debt ceiling limit increase. The next day in the Oval Office, that's exactly what Trump proposes, gets all the Democrats to sign up, sort of, at the behest of or not at the behest of, but at to much chagrin on the Republican side.
I think it was actually a Democrat. The Democrats proposed it. It
the
was
Democrats proposed it. Okay.
Yeah, and then Trump, they were basically countering or two options, the Republican plan and the Democrat plan, and Trump went with the Democrats.
He probably didn't know they were Democrats. He's just that stupid. He probably was just like, "Who are you? Do you work for me?" That's a good idea.
Right. Yeah, they probably flattered him a little bit. Chuck Schumer appealed to his New York roots, and that was that.
Exactly. That's probably exactly how it went down. But so I guess point taken. But it still doesn't change the fact that the day before Ryan is sitting there saying it's ridiculous and disgraceful, and then Trump goes for that option, and the next day Ryan has to defend it in front of the news cameras, and he's like, "Oh, I never said that." And he was literally on camera saying it the day before. So Paul Ryan was looking very clownish in that exchange. But they're really just kicking the can down the road, guys, because it's now everything is going to come to a head in December, where they're going to have to do the same thing all over again and pass a budget, extend the debt ceiling limit, and heading into sort of uncharted waters going into the end of the year where anything could happen.
Right. And I mean, what favors the Democrats in this scenario, as I alluded to a little bit earlier, is that when you bring up the debt ceiling again, it gives a little more leverage to Democrats to try to to take control of the media narrative. Because, what McConnell and Ryan wanted was to kick the can further down the road so that they wouldn't have to deal with this shit until after the 2018 midterms. But instead, they have to deal with it now. So there is an element that Democrats benefit from being able to have this as an item to dispute and to make sure that things are getting funded properly. But on the other hand, I mean, the debt ceiling has been such a a kind of superficial point of debate in the last 8-9 years, right? So
less. If you remember, the GOP used this in their initial threats to sort of shut down the government in 2011, I believe, where this was the first time ever that somebody threatened to not increase the debt limit, which is ridiculous because we already spent the money. So if you are a fiscal conservative and you oppose raising the debt limit under fiscal conservative principles, we already spent the cash. This has nothing to do with fiscal responsibility. This is literally just you being a cheap ass and not wanting to pay the bill that the U.S. racked up. It's like Republicans going to the club, spending a lot of money. They don't want to pay the bill in the end, and they just want to shut down the club, in essence.
Yeah, that was basically my impression of it too. I suppose they could try to find the money somewhere else to make up the difference. Through cuts, I guess maybe is what they're thinking. I don't really know, to be honest, what the Republicans are thinking.
That was all an artificial, or it was all an artifice. The idea that the debt is so important that we shouldn't raise the ceiling. That was always just an excuse for Republicans to say that Obama sucks or something. Whereas now they're in power, and what we've seen over Republican administrations, whether it's Trump or Bush or Reagan, et cetera, is that they don't mind spending as long as it's on the things that they want. So none of that matters. So I think there is actually a decent argument also that the debt ceiling shouldn't even be an issue. We're playing chicken with with the credit of the United States government, when really either party just wants it to go up. I think there's an unofficial rule in Congress that prior to Eric Cantor and the Tea Party people back in 2011,
exactly.
Prior to that, there was this unofficial rule that anytime you pass a bill, some legislation that includes some money, then the debt ceiling goes up by that amount anyway. Nobody cares about it. It was just used as as a political football to say fuck you, Obama.
Exactly. It's politics in its most shameful form. But I guess lastly on this issue of the budget deal, do you actually think, do either of you buy into the media hype that there's some kind of a Trump pivot here? Like, is this the day that Trump became president when he brokered a deal between Republicans and Democrats, or do you think that this was just a a temporary lapse in judgment, or a hallucination on behalf of Crooked Donald?
No, I think it's like as I was mentioning earlier. I think it's like he's the lab rat that has been hitting the wrong button, and what he seeks is like positive media coverage, and he happened to hit the button that doesn't electrocute you.
He did it for ratings.
Yeah, exactly. He did it, and now he's noticing that there are good ratings, and he's like, "Ooh, great." So I hope that he does more things that are like in alignment with Democrats, such that he can get positive ratings. That would be awesome. But he's still like a vain, narcissistic, racist piece of shit. So like that's not going away.
Right. I think that's the important point, is that he won't make these types of compromises on racial issues or immigration, things that his base really cares about. But I think this type of issue where his base doesn't really feel that strongly either way about the budget deal, they probably don't even know what the debt ceiling is.
No, they don't.
So this doesn't hurt him. So he'll probably do more of this on specific issues.
Yeah, exactly. On throwaway issues, let's say. So, well, you heard it here first, folks. The Trump pivot is not real. And we'll just have to stay tuned to see if this prediction is right. Let's move on to another big story of the week, which is Hillary Clinton has a new book, guys. And what happened?
Yeah, that's a good question, Tarek. What did happen?
What did happen? Because I'm just really confused, guys. I'm literally just asking what happened.
Yeah, I think the name of this book maybe should have been "What Had Happened Was."
What happened was.
Yeah,
I blew the election. I think.
Yeah, it's exactly. It's and I think it also expresses the kind of feeling that we all had on Wednesday, November 9th, was it? Where we had felt like we just blacked out the entire year, and we're asking ourselves what happened. And it seems like the person at the top of the ticket also felt that.
This is the dude, where's my car moment of political tell-alls. What happened is, okay, besides being a ridiculous title for the book, it's just in some ways to me, unless having not read the book, okay, in full disclosure, unless it's a mea culpa of her like taking some responsibility for losing the election, the title "What Happened," if it's to blame other people, just seems really pretentious to me. I don't know, Tim. Like, do you agree with that? If it's like "What happened," and then you're just like pointing the finger at someone else rather than saying
it's just amazing to me that Hillary Clinton can't figure out like what people want to hear and just say it.
Exactly.
Maybe she's like at a point in her life where she doesn't care what people think anymore. But if so, then get out of politics. If you don't care what people think of you, then politics is the wrong place to be. And it's just more of the same of what we've been seeing from her since the election. Throwing Bernie under the bus, calling the masses sexist. And like even I've been seeing stuff on Twitter where if you criticize Hillary Clinton's book, all of a sudden you're a sexist. Like you're a man telling a woman to shut up. And I've been seeing this stuff all over Twitter, which I don't really agree with. We should obviously keep an open mind for politicians and be accepting to women, but Hillary Clinton is not the woman to run the country, in my opinion. Or at least, I would have loved for her to have been president over Donald Trump, obviously, but
there's probably like 10 women I could think of who would be better president.
Yeah, there's so many better candidates. That's the thing. So it's sort of like, why does Hillary Clinton have to represent all women? And my criticism of Hillary Clinton equals criticism of all women.
No, but okay, so I'm gonna play a little devil's advocate here. I think there's a little jump between saying like that criticizing Hillary Clinton isn't a criticism of all women, and then to jump to say that Hillary Clinton shouldn't write this book or release it. Because actually, the thing that I think is is fine in the release of the book, and what I find a little relieving, and actually I think kind of interesting, and maybe potentially interesting to read about in excerpts, is like a really I don't give a fuck like statement of what exactly happened during the campaign, and ragging on the Trump people for and calling them out for their like righteously for their bullshit, and then also pointing out things in the American like electoral process that are challenging, and there are things that were difficult in the primary and things that were difficult in the general election. I think it's better that she's being candid and honest about it than not being candid and honest about it. If she was kind of continuing to be like artificial or something, that would be a continuation of the same things that people didn't like in the first place. So to go from being too cautious and too talking point oriented into now being perceived as too honest or too candid, I think that's also a little hypocritical on the audience's part. That what are we criticizing her for? She's just a private citizen. It doesn't seem like she's running for anything. Let her just write this book and say how she feels about what was undeniably a crazy like election process.
Yeah, I support her writing the book. I have nothing against that. It's more so that unless, and I haven't seen any excerpts, but like Rahul or Tim, did you get any sense of her taking any personal responsibility for the loss, or was it literally just kind of like Trump's an asshole, which we all agree with, by the way,
Yeah.
But like, was there any personal responsibility?
Well, so the thing that I want to wait and see for like how people that actually read the book and then review it, kind of interpret the full book. The excerpts that have come out have been salacious. So this is part on the part of the Hillary people and their the book and the marketing of the book. They're kind of releasing things that are going to get like hot takes on the internet, on Twitter in particular. But then as a result, it's riling up, I think, both the mainstream audience and then within the kind of liberal sphere, the Hillary versus Bernie 2016 relitigation. So There have been some excerpts that came out that were about like kind of blatant sexism from the Trump campaign, things that were like awkward for her in dealing with Trump, which are I don't think are things that are too controversial for us. But then there's also there are excerpts that came out that were critical of the Bernie wing of the party, that it seemed it was impossible to placate them because you have to keep increasingly promising more things that are unrealistic. And I think she expressed like a concern that like you can't satisfy these people, and if you do try to come to their side, then they'll call you out for being a hypocrite or something.
Yeah, I think. No, I mean, I think you're absolutely right that like it's all a part of the marketing for the book, right? They're releasing like the most salacious things, but I'm wondering whether this is what Hillary wants them to release, or the publishing company is just like trying to sell the book. But I think either way. If I was Hillary, I wouldn't do this. I guess and I think if she wants people to like her more, then she wouldn't write a book like this. I'm not really sure. I'm just confused about her motivation, like what she's hoping to get out of this, and like she must have some people close to her who can like read it and say, no, people are going to hate this, because it's obvious if you lose the election and then you don't go into any details about mistakes you may have made, which people have pointed out some pretty glaring ones. in addition to the fact that she's got some likability issues, there were some strategic missteps, certainly, in terms of not going into Wisconsin, not going into some other places. So I think she needs to realize that this is not what people want to hear, and like get some good advisors around her to tell her this.
Yeah, maybe she was just like actually legitimately looking for help and answers with this book. Like what happened? Like maybe that she was like looking for like to crowdsource an explanation as to why she lost the election. I do think that she would have gotten more people to buy the book from both sides if it was called My Emails, because she just like republished the Wikipedia leaks and just made a lot of money off of emails that were already out there, is my own personal view. But I mean, I think there's nothing new here, Tim. Like, she doesn't have great advisors. That's why she continues to be a poor politician. Like that's my own personal view.
I just think, like, especially those of us on the left of center side of things, I think there's overly harsh criticism for this because, dude, like, we all recognize that, like, the rise of Trump is one of the craziest, like, most awful things we've seen in, like, national, in national politics in our lifetime. And for her to vent about it, like, I don't think there's anything wrong about that. She should be president, but
yeah.
A confluence of factors led to, like, this madman becoming, like, occupying that seat. So what? And also he proved that the being, like, kind of politically calm and centered and reasonable, like, doesn't solve doesn't equate to a win. So why should she release, if she was going to write a book, which all politicians do, why should the book be calm and normal and like talking point oriented when everything that happened in the last year shows that, well, speaking honestly and frankly and fucking racistly or something is that's what actually hits people. Why not just, like, take off the gloves or what have you?
Yeah, I mean, I think for two reasons. One is that's not her identity. So just because Trump did well with that, her adopting that when that has never been who she has been is not necessarily going to work well. It's like she's trying out this new identity for the first time, and it's not working. It's not working out very well. The other point is just that I think she just needs to do what I mean. It's okay to be candid, but it's bad to be too honest when the honesty is ugly. Like in this case, the honest truth is kind of ugly, which is that she still has not taken any responsibility for it herself. That is honestly what she thinks, that it's not her, that it was not her fault at all, which is the last thing that people want to hear. But honesty is good when it's what people want to hear. But that's the thing that I'd be curious to hear from, like, when people read the full book and they post reviews and stuff, whether there is some element of, like, how much there is of admitting, like, she had managerial challenges, or should have gone into Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania more, or like admitting some of those tactical things, but also acknowledging, I think rightfully, it would be disingenuous for her not to acknowledge a lot of the bullshit that happened from the Trump people and from the Republican Party in general, and the Fox News kind of, like, propaganda that fuels this madness on the right wing. To not call that out, I think, would be disingenuous. If she put out a book that was just like, oh, America is great, yeah, I lost, that sucks, but everything's good otherwise. Let me give you an analogy. Like, what do you think about an athlete who complains about the refs after a game? Like, no matter whether the refs actually affected the outcome, you never want to hear them complain about the refs, because it's like the cheapest excuse for a loss. It's saying, like, the system has been rigged against me and there was nothing I could do. It was beyond my control.
But I don't think it's
as much what Trump did.
I don't think it's as much as the refs. As the opposing team is so evil and fucked up that they, like, manipulated the system and did all sorts of dastardly tactics. Like, if if an athlete wanted to say like, look, I was in this Super Bowl and the opposing team like fucking sucked and they did all sorts of like shitty tactics, like what's wrong with that?
Well, I mean people say that about the Patriots, right? For example, like people always find excuses for why they lose. That's it's just like a human instinct,
It's human instinct. Although I was perusing some headlines earlier, and like there was a great headline from the Los Angeles Times that said, Hillary Clinton, what happened? Like she still doesn't know. I mean, like there weren't like it's like some critiques of her memoirs, even though it's just excerpts at this point, or that she still didn't give any answers as to why. Like it just seems to be like random complaints and observations based on that. But I am interested to see what fully comes out. Rahul, I have no issue with her writing the book. As long as we all just move on, in the sense that Hillary, please don't run again in 2020. And I don't know, like a part of me is just like still terrified that it will happen, even though just like as a party we need to move on.
Yeah, I don't think so.
But I don't think she will, but I'm not like a part of me is a little afraid that she won't move on.
If I had to pick one person who would not move on and try to run again, I think it would be Hillary Clinton.
It would be Hillary Clinton. Exactly. You heard it first here on Radio Free USA, Hillary 2020. Guys, let's move on to Clown of the Week. And I think it's safe to say that none of us would nominate Hillary Clinton as Clown of the Week, because we wouldn't do that to one of our own. But Rahul, who are you going to nominate this week?
So I'm going to nominate this week a man named Gary Cohn, one of President Donald Trump's, globalist Gary. He's one of the top economic advisors of Trump, and he had been until recently hoping to be nominated for the chair of the Fed. Apparently, that was one of his original goals, like in joining the White House and allying himself with Trump. Janet Yellen's term expires next year, and he was hoping to be nominated as a replacement. But apparently Trump has decided no, he's off of the running list because Gary Cohn, who is Jewish and kind of a moderate, like kind of just he's a Goldman Sachs alum, kind of a centrist Republican type. He objected to the Charlottesville Nazi incident about a month ago, which we're learning in Trump circles is actually like that's a huge offense to be anti-Nazi. Treason. Yeah, exactly. It's treasonous to be anti-Nazi. So Gary Cohn put out this like very middling, pathetic, I think, rebuke of Nazism like a month ago that those of us that are left of center would have looked at and been like, you fucking pussy. Like you see literal Nazis on American soil engaging in a terrorist act, and they murdered an American citizen, and this is all you have to say. And then it apparently turns out the thing he had to say was way too much for Trump. So this is a guy who sold his soul to Trump, someone who probably was not in line with the Steve Bannon ideology, but who put up with it because he thought that his end goal would be to become Fed chair. And then when push came to shove and the Charlottesville incident occurred, he expressed some like lukewarm, rejection of Nazis. And then Trump is like, nope, you're done. You're done. So this is a lesson on like what are the costs to allying yourself with Trump. And in fact, Steve Bannon, whose disgusting face is on 60 Minutes this week. I have it on my DVR. I should watch it, but I don't want to. I just don't want to see his face ever again. But Steve Bannon, I think it's contagious. Steve Bannon says in that interview that Gary Cohn should have resigned in that moment. That like to express anything against the president is something that you should resign, you should be fired for, and that the sentiment that he's referring to is being against Nazis. So congratulations, bro, Gary Cohn. Like you played yourself.
You played yourself. Where does he go from here? Like, is he going to resign? Or
no, I think he's still on the fucking board. He's just like he's just being a bitch, like on it, just like sitting on the advisory on the kind of economic advisory panel, or he's a senior economic advisor, but is just going to like put up with this. So now he's not going to achieve his goal, but he still gets to be like pretty powerful, I guess. But
Okay.
yeah, good job, dude.
Played yourself.
Nice. That's a good one, Rahul. So for mine, my clown of the week, I'm going with Rush Limbaugh, who he called Hurricane Irma a liberal hoax. But this was, of course, before he received the evacuation orders, apparently, because he then was forced to evacuate his Florida home. So, I mean, it's just despicable, right? You're telling people to stay where they are, basically, don't worry about the hurricane. You could legitimately be costing people's lives, and and you have access to a megaphone, which you could be using for greater good. You could be telling people to heed the warnings and be safe. So he chose he made the wrong decision there, and
He's a truther.
He is a truther. He is a hurricane truther.
A hurricane truther. Like, what is wrong with these people? I mean, hurricane after hurricane after hurricane coming through. These sort of 1 in 500 year storms keep happening, and yet it's a liberal hoax. Like, I just don't. And there's no apology, right? Like, he's not going to come back and say, "Oh, I was wrong." He's just going to be like, "Hey, I'm back, guys, in my studio."
Yeah, and
flooded a little bit.
And these right wing trolls have kind of like politicized the climate so much that it was like Rush Limbaugh saying it's a liberal hoax that a fucking hurricane exists, and then I think Ann Coulter also tweeted about it, saying something that that liberals are overestimating how powerful this storm is or something. I don't understand what the upside is aside from just I don't understand what the positive upside for humanity is to not warn people about a fucking storm.
It was the most powerful hurricane in the Atlantic ever, apparently.
Yeah, I think it's about climate change denial, but you can't deny a hurricane. I mean, there's no way to fake a hurricane. At that point, this is like close to to being a flat earther. Right. It's like the proof that it's wrong is like right in front of you every day. But I mean, not every day. I mean, just the days that the hurricane is there. But yeah, they still think it's a hoax.
Oh my gosh. Well, Rush Limbaugh, that also sounds very clownish. For me, I am nominating Paul Ryan, your boy. And
Your boy.
Has Paul Ryan ever won Clown of the Week? I don't think so.
I don't think so. Not yet.
Yeah, we'll have to keep him in mind one day. Because, last week, as we discussed earlier, he, came out and said, it's absolutely ridiculous people play politics with the debt ceiling, even though, him and Eric Cantor and John Boehner back in 2011 are the ones who created this, nuclear football of a political stunt, right? And then he has to go back on his knees and essentially, accept this politicization of Hurricane Harvey relief funding, bundled together with an extension of the debt, basically a continuing resolution to extend funding for the federal government until December, and also lift the debt ceiling. So for Paul Ryan, it was a moment in, it was a lesson in dignity for a man who has none. And guys, the other reason why I think he's very clownish is there's a lot of talk now that the Republicans in the House, the so-called Freedom Caucus, are thinking about replacing Paul Ryan. Have you guys heard any of this chatter?
I have not.
No, I have not. Yeah. What's the latest?
Yeah, so it's in relation to the fact that as Speaker of the House, with a strong Republican majority in the House, with a Republican majority in the Senate, and the White House in full control, the Republicans have still been unable to pass any legislation. And particularly given that the House is where you can pass legislation by a simple majority, right? They don't have the same sort of machinations as the Senate, where they operate under unanimous consent and things like that. He has been unable to lead his caucus and pass any of the legislation that he has advocated for. He's been speaker, guys, for almost 2 years at this point, and there isn't a single legislative achievement to his name. So he's getting sniped from the right, saying, "Oh, he's not, conservative enough," which is. Yeah, he's a cuck, which is a bit ironic because someone like Paul Ryan recently in an interview, apparently he didn't know what the minimum wage is in Wisconsin. I mean, the guy's been a congressman for over, I would say, at least 15 years, and he doesn't know what the minimum wage is in his own state. He's the same guy who apparently used to, his life goal is to abolish the social safety net, and yet. Now that he has his finger on the trigger, he's been unable to accomplish anything. Hasn't been able to pass a single major piece of legislation, and has to rely on a drunk Trump who, probably, as we discussed earlier, didn't even know the Democrats were the ones who suggested the Hurricane Harvey bill, to actually pass a piece of legislation. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, I think Trump is getting fed up with the Republicans, and mainly because they keep serving him these major failures in the media, right? Like the healthcare was a huge failure, and Paul Ryan's face was pretty closely attached to that, so that definitely hurt him politically. I remember when Paul Ryan gave his awesome PowerPoint presentation about the healthcare plan, which was 3 slides. I'm starting to think these guys are just lazy and not willing to do the actual work. I mean, or maybe maybe their staffs are terrible. Their staff is terrible, but to go 7 years of Obama talking about replacing healthcare and then having nothing is pretty bad.
Yeah, and I think there was a stat. I'm trying to remember what the percentage is of GOP congressmen that have never worked under a Republican president before. So it's something like 30, maybe it's 30% or so of the GOP House, I think in particular, has always been under Obama because 2010 was such a tidal wave change in Republican direction that they've never been in a position to actually need to work on real legislation that's actually going to get passed. So they've kind of been like a dog chasing a car.
Protest votes.
Yeah, all protest votes. All it is was fuck Obama, and they've never been in a position to actually figure out a piece of legislation that's actually going to pass and affect people. So they're kind of they look like idiots, and Paul Ryan is, I think, a perfect example of that.
Yeah, he is a perfect clown of the week choice, but I don't know, I kind of feel like Rush Limbaugh, just being who he is, deserves to be clown of the week. Rahul, do you agree with that?
I think so. Senator Al Franken famously had a book called, the title of the book was Rush Limbaugh is a Big Fat Idiot. So I think that I think applies very well here. He's a big fat idiot.
A big fat clown of the week. Tim, nice call there. Good call this week.
Thanks, dude.
There you go. Serving him up like the John Stockton of Clown of the Week there, serving up those clowns. Keep feeding them in. Well, that's another great week, guys. Congrats, 20th edition of the pod. Here's to another 20 pods, and we look forward to giving away a $20 Amazon gift card to our loyal fans. So stay tuned for that, and we'll be back next week.